My name is Evan Walker, and the last normal memory I have of Houston is from room 223B at Houston Metro University, where I sat sweating through my t-shirt in Dr. Finch's 4 p.m. English literature class, her chalk squeaking against the blackboard as she circled phrases in Ashbery's poems. "Notice how the poet creates distance here," she said, tapping the board with yellowed fingernails. "The eye becomes unreliable, almost hostile to the reader." My notebook lay open but empty on the desk. Red Bull hadn't saved me from the crushing fatigue of staying up until 4 a.m. My eyelids felt like they had fishing weights attached to them. The first phone blast jolted me upright, my knee banging the underside of the desk. Then came a second alert, then a dozen more, each with that piercing, can't-ignore-it electronic screech. Around me, 37 students all reached for their pockets and backpacks at once. I fumbled my phone out of my jeans pocket, thumbprint smudged screen lighting up with bright amber text. "Emergency alert, seismic activity detected. Leave Houston immediately." "What the actual hell?" whispered Michaela beside me, her blonde ponytail swinging as she leaned over, coffee breath hitting my cheek. Her phone displayed the same message. "Is this some poor bastard's last day on the job?" "Government alerts don't usually joke," I said, my throat suddenly tight and dry. At the front of the class, Dr. Finch's wrinkled hand hovered over the chalk tray. "Everyone, let's not overreact," she said, voice strained like a violin string. "I'm certain there's been a system malfunction or—" Finch's mouth froze mid-sentence as a second tremor sent a 6-foot crack racing across the wall behind her, plaster crumbling onto her tweed-covered shoulders. For a heartbeat, everything went silent except for my pulse pounding in my ears like a kettle drum. Then chaos. We stampeded for the door, elbows knocking against each other. I spotted Clarence Brown 15 feet away, a 35-year-old PhD candidate with a salt and pepper beard and permanently ink-stained fingers. He stood with his back against the wall, fingers digging into his leather messenger bag so hard the knuckles shone white. "God help us, Evan," he croaked, eyes reflecting the blinking emergency lights. "This can't be real." He pushed himself off the wall, stumbled toward a group of terrified freshmen, then disappeared around the corner. That was the last time I saw him alive. Outside, the contrast between normalcy and disaster turned my stomach. The late April sun hung in a perfect Texas blue sky, but the glass facade of Hoffman Library had shattered, shards glittering across the lawn. I spotted my friends huddled under the bronze statue of the university's founder, now listing dangerously to one side, as if old Jeffrey Houston himself was trying to flee. Jacob Ford, my roommate with his perpetual 3-day stubble and collection of vintage metal band t-shirts, waved frantically, his usual smirk replaced by wide animal panic. Beth Simmons stood beside him, her pre-med ID badge still clipped to her blue cardigan, dark curls escaping her normally perfect bun. Tina Tran was typing furiously on her phone, while Annie Marshall, who I'd seen dismantle and rebuild an engine without breaking a sweat, was gnawing her bottom lip bloody. I'd barely reached them when the ground lurched again. I crashed into Beth, nearly knocking us both down. Her fingers dug into my bicep, steadying us both. "What the heck is going on?" Jacob's voice cracked, his left eye twitching rapidly. "Houston doesn't get goddamn earthquakes. That's not a thing that happens here." "It physically shouldn't be possible," Annie muttered, thumbs flying across her shattered phone screen. "The nearest fault line is hundreds of miles away. There's no tectonic plate activity here at all." "Twitter's exploding," Tina said, her slight Vietnamese accent thickening with stress. "Look, people downtown are saying entire blocks are just sinking, disappearing." Beth's breathing came in sharp, shallow gasps. "My brother died when that bridge collapsed in Galveston," she whispered, nails still digging into my arm hard enough to leave half-moon marks. "The car went through the guardrail. They found him still strapped to his seat. I can't be around things collapsing. I just can't." I squeezed her shoulder, felt her trembling beneath my palm. "We'll be careful." "Careful?" Jacob barked a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Did you miss the part where the goddamn building nearly fell on us? There's no careful for this shit. Annie looked up from her phone, face pale beneath her freckles. Some people are saying they've seen things in the cracks, moving, not debris or pipes. Things. That's ridiculous, I said immediately, though a cold dread seemed to settle in my gut. It's mass hysteria. We need to get out, Tina cut in. Now. Together. The wind had picked up, whipping her straight black hair across her face. What if it stops? Jacob asked, a pathetic hope in his voice. Maybe it's just a one-off freak. His words died as all our phones shrieked again with the same alert. He jumped like he'd been shocked, nearly dropping his phone onto the cracked pavement. This isn't stopping, Tina said, pointing at a new fissure splitting the walkway beside us. The crack was 6 inches wide, bottomless black disappearing beneath us. My throat closed up. Then we go. Right now. The faculty parking lot had turned into a demolition derby. A blue Mazda backed into a cherry-red Mustang, metal crunching against metal. 3 separate car alarms wailed in clashing electronic melodies. A Toyota pickup tried mounting the curb to bypass the jam and got stuck, rear wheels spinning uselessly, spitting gravel. My piece of shit Honda is there, Jacob said, jabbing his finger toward a rusted-out 2005 Civic with a dented rear bumper and duct-taped side mirror. He mashed his key fob repeatedly, his thumb turning white with pressure. God damn it, the battery must be dead again. Beth clutched his elbow, her fingers trembling as she pointed toward the exit gate where a FedEx truck had T-boned a campus security golf cart. Behind them, at least 30 cars sat bumper to bumper, horns honking in a meaningless cacophony. There's no way out through there, she said, voice small. The asphalt under my Chuck Taylors suddenly split with a sound like ripping canvas. A jagged fissure zigzagged toward us, swallowing white parking space lines. Jacob jumped backward, stumbling into a parked BMW, setting off yet another alarm. He stared down as the crack widened to 3 inches, then 4, tendrils of steam rising from darkness that seemed to have no bottom. Damn. His face went paste white. It almost took my freaking foot. Tina yanked her backpack straps tight against her shoulders, jaw set like concrete. We walk. Now. Are you high? Jacob's voice rose an octave, cracking on the last word. It's like 7 miles to get outside the loop. In this heat? I stepped between them, feeling sweat trickle down my spine. The cars are death traps, man. You saw what happened to the science building. The parking garage could collapse any second. We abandoned the parking lot, joining the stream of people fleeing on foot. The downtown skyline looked wrong somehow, like a mouth missing teeth where buildings should have been. We'd barely made it 50 yards when the 20-foot LED screen mounted on the student union wall, usually displaying upcoming events and football scores, crackled to life. The scrolling emergency evacuation text disappeared, replaced by a wild-eyed blonde reporter, her makeup smeared, hair escaping its shellacked perfection. Confirming massive structural damage to downtown Houston, she said, voice vibrating with barely controlled panic. We're getting reports of entire city blocks simply collapsing. The Transco building has... Oh God, it's just gone. Emergency services are completely overwhelmed. If you're anywhere near the city center, leave immediately. I repeat, leave. Behind her shoulder, helicopter footage showed what looked like a massive meteor impact in the heart of downtown. The J.P. Morgan Chase Tower leaned at a 40-degree angle. The Bank of America Center had pancaked, floor upon floor compressed into rubble. A massive sinkhole had swallowed 4 blocks of Main Street, cars tumbling into darkness like toys. Annie pressed her palm against her mouth. Jesus. The camera zoomed in on the crater's edge, and for 2 heartbeats, I saw something move in the darkness. Something huge and segmented, like a massive insect limb, before the feed abruptly cut to a technical difficulties graphic, then to pitch black as the screen lost power. You saw that, right? Jacob grabbed my shoulder, fingers digging in painfully. His pupils had swallowed his irises. "Tell me you saw that thing moving down there." My throat felt thick. "Collapsing infrastructure," I managed. "Gas explosions, maybe." We raided the campus convenience store, grabbing armfuls of Dasani water bottles, Cliff Bars, packets of Advil, and Band-Aids. The ancient security guard, Walter, according to his nameplate, sat slumped behind the counter. His liver-spotted hands trembled so badly that he couldn't grip his walkie-talkie. Cloudy cataracts obscured eyes that had seen 70 Houston summers. "Should stop you youngsters," he mumbled, lips quivering around yellowed dentures. "Against policy to just take inventory." "We'll pay you back," I lied, stuffing 4 Red Bulls into my backpack. Walter's roomy eyes fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. "Been here since '82. Never felt nothing like this. My grandson said on the Facebook they're saying it's secret government testing. Fracking. Russians." He wet his cracked lips. "But that ain't it. Something woke up down there. Something old." A chill, unrelated to the heat, traced its way down my spine. When I stepped outside, Beth was hunched against the wall, shoulders heaving. Mascara tears carved black rivers down her flushed cheeks. Her iPhone screen was cracked, but she still clutched it like a lifeline. "My parents live on Louisiana Street," she croaked, the words thick with mucus. 3 blocks from where that hole opened up. They're not answering texts, not answering calls. I wanted to promise they were fine, that they'd grabbed the emergency kit Beth's mom always kept in the hall closet and evacuated safely. But instead, I squeezed her shoulder, feeling her collarbone sharp against my palm. "We'll keep trying," I managed. We jogged north, joining the exodus. Every storefront we passed had cracked windows or collapsed awnings. Fire sprinklers had triggered in the campus bookstore, soaking textbooks and Houston Metro hoodies. A man in a business suit sat on the curb outside Starbucks, staring at his bleeding palms, laughing and hitching broken bursts. Through the shifting mass of bodies, I spotted Clarence 50 yards ahead, his leather messenger bag bouncing against his hip as he herded 6 terrified freshmen toward Wilkins Auditorium, a squat red brick building from the 1950s with "Built to Last" ironically carved into its cornerstone. I raised my hand, started to call out, but the words died as the ground beneath the auditorium buckled. The massive crack that formed sounded like God snapping a redwood in half. The brick walls shuddered, bulged outward, then collapsed inward, as if some giant hand had reached up and yanked the building into the earth. "Clarence!" I screamed, my voice lost in the thunderous roar. The entire auditorium imploded in 4.8 seconds. I know because later I'd replay my iPhone video over and over, counting frames. The cloud of pulverized brick and concrete billowed outward, engulfing everything in a 30-yard radius. The air filled with a high-pitched keening, people screaming or metal shearing or both. Beth's fingernails dug crescents into my forearm as she yanked me backward. "Evan, stop. You can't. That's Clarence in there." I lurched forward, but she clung to me with desperate strength. "He could still be. He's gone." Annie's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "They're all gone." The cloud parted enough to reveal a 20-foot pile of broken brick and twisted rebar where the auditorium had stood. A severed arm lay near the edge, still wearing a silver wristwatch. A textbook fluttered in the hot breeze, pages splashed crimson. Not a single voice called for help from the wreckage. My stomach lurched into my throat. I bent double, retching stringy bile onto my shoes. Clarence Brown, who collected first editions of Faulkner and brought homemade peanut brittle to every department meeting, was just gone. Atomized. My professor from last semester. Those kids who'd trusted him. All converted to red smears beneath tons of brick. We staggered off campus on rubber legs. The streets beyond were a fever dream. A city bus had jackknifed across Montrose Boulevard, its accordion middle section twisted like pulled taffy. A heavy-set HPD officer with sweat patches spreading beneath his arms tried directing traffic with a flashlight, but nobody followed his signals. We ducked down Hawthorne Street, a narrow residential lane lined with azalea bushes in full pink bloom, incongruously beautiful against the chaos. A calico cat streaked past us, its flank gashed open to reveal glistening muscle, a ribbon of blood marking its path. Beth turned to me, eyes wide and glassy. A bruise was forming on her cheekbone where someone had elbowed her in the crush. "Evan, where are we going? You grew up here. What's the fastest way out?" My tongue felt twice its normal size. Since when had I become the leader? I was the quiet English major who got nauseated ordering at McDonald's because there were too many menu options. But 4 pairs of eyes fixed on me, desperate for direction. I took a shuddering breath. We head east on Richmond. Follow the light rail tracks if the roads are too jammed. Aim for Highway 59. Once we're outside the loop, we can figure out where to go from there. We'd only taken 3 steps when the earth convulsed again. I slammed into a cast iron lamppost, the impact rattling my teeth. Metal groaned as the pole swayed like a metronome, its glass fixture exploding in a shower of shards that sliced my forearm. "Move your asses," Annie shouted, already running. Behind us, downtown Houston, the city where I'd spent the last 3 years of my life, tore itself apart. And underneath it all, if you listened closely, something massive shifted beneath the pavement. We ducked into a narrow service alley behind Somnium Coffee, its windows covered with X-shaped blue tape that hadn't saved the glass from shattering. "We screwed up leaving campus," Jacob said suddenly, kicking an empty Red Bull can with unnecessary force. It clattered against a dumpster, startling a mangy pigeon into flight. That auditorium had reinforced walls, concrete foundation, was designed as a fallout shelter back in the Cold War. "You mean the auditorium that's now a 20-foot pile of brick dust?" Annie's voice cracked like a whip. "The one where we literally watched people get crushed to death?" "Keep your voice down," Tina hissed, her gaze darting to the fire escape above us. Rust flakes drifted down as the metal stairs vibrated with another small tremor. "These buildings are unstable." A thin, high-pitched wail cut through our argument. 10 feet away at the mouth of the alley, a Latino woman in her early 30s sat on the curb, arms wrapped around a toddler in Ninja Turtles pajamas. Her navy Ford Focus was half buried under chunks of concrete cornice that had fallen from the building above. Beth immediately moved toward her, medical instincts overriding everything else. She crouched down on bruised knees, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Are you hurt? Is your little boy okay?" The woman shook her head, rocking slightly. Her gold cross necklace caught the fading sunlight. "He's not injured, just scared." Her English was perfect but flavored with a soft Gulf Coast accent. "I'm looking for my husband, Miguel. Have you seen anyone coming from downtown? From JP Morgan Chase?" I pictured the skyscraper I'd seen in the news feed, the one leaning at that sickening angle, floors pancaking into each other. The knot in my stomach tightened. "I'm sorry," Beth said softly, squeezing the woman's shoulder. "We just came from the university. Miguel said they were evacuating." The woman's voice trembled as she stroked her son's sweaty hair. "He texted me at 3:48, said they were using the emergency stairs. That was," she checked her cracked watch, "an hour and 23 minutes ago. His phone's going straight to voicemail now." Beth looked back at us, her eyes pleading. I knew what she was asking. Could we help? Should we take them with us? But I also remembered the news footage. Chase Tower was almost certainly gone. Miguel was probably gone with it. "I'm so sorry," Beth said, reaching into her backpack and pulling out a bottle of water and a granola bar. "Take these. If you head 3 blocks west, we saw emergency responders setting up a triage center at St. Joseph's Church. They might have information about evacuees." "Thanks," the woman whispered, clutching the water bottle. The toddler stared at us with wide, unblinking eyes as we walked away. Then, out of nowhere, a faint moan sliced through my thoughts. Not wind, not machinery, but distinctly human. It came from a 7-Eleven at the other corner, its front windows shattered into glittering constellations across the sidewalk. A slurry of melted Slurpees, broken glass, and blood leaked from the doorway. Beth froze. "Someone's in there," she whispered. Annie checked her Apple Watch, the cracked screen illuminating her freckles. "It's 6:43. Sunset's in 20 minutes. We need to find shelter before dark. So we just leave them?" Beth's voice crackled with indignation. Her right eye twitched, the same telltale sign of stress I'd seen during finals. "Another casualty we just walk away from?" Annie flinched as if Beth had physically struck her. "That's not fair," she said, her voice suddenly small. "I'm just trying to keep us alive." "And I'm trying to stay human," Beth shot back. Her lower lip quivered. "What's the point of surviving if we leave pieces of our souls behind with every person we don't help?" She turned to me, green eyes swimming with tears. "Evan, please." The moaning intensified, wet, gurgling, desperate. My stomach flip-flopped. Another tremor might bring the entire convenience store down in seconds. But the naked plea in Beth's eyes was impossible to refuse. 2 minutes, I said. In and out. First sign of trouble, we're gone. We inched through the jagged door frame. The moan led us to the back of the 7-Eleven, where the magazine rack had toppled onto the checkout counter. Behind it, we found two people, a pot-bellied middle-aged man in a Houston Astros jersey with his right arm bent at a nauseating angle, bone visibly protruding through skin. Beside him, a 20-something woman with a septum piercing lay half-pinned under a fallen refrigeration unit. The sleeve of her Rice University hoodie was soaked crimson to the elbow. "Please," the man croaked, his Texas drawl thickened by pain. "My daughter. Help her first." Beth dropped to her knees, quick fingers checking the woman's pulse at her throat. "We need to move this fridge," she ordered, medic mode fully engaged. "Careful, her leg looks badly fractured." The commercial refrigerator weighed at least 300 pounds. Annie, Jacob, Tina, and I positioned ourselves at the corners, muscles straining as we lifted. Sweat poured into my eyes, stinging with salt. 1 inch, 2 inches, 3. The woman whimpered as pressure eased from her crushed leg. "She's free," Beth shouted above the noise. "Get her out now." We abandoned the fridge, letting it crash back to the tile. I grabbed the woman under her armpits while Jacob supported her father. Their combined weight nearly buckled my knees as we staggered toward the exit. We emerged onto the sidewalk just as the 7-Eleven's roof support gave way with a sound like cannon fire. The entire structure pancaked, concrete dust billowing out the broken windows. If we'd been inside 10 seconds longer. We laid the injured pair against a relatively stable-looking brick wall across the street. The daughter sobbed quietly, clutching her mangled leg. The father whispered soothing nonsense, though his own face was gray with shock, his broken arm cradled against his chest. Miraculously, a fire truck screamed past, then abruptly U-turned when the firefighter in the passenger seat spotted us. The paramedic who jumped out wore a 1,000-yard stare above his sweat-soaked collar. Streaks of someone else's blood stained his latex gloves. "We've got 2 more, I told him, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "We'll do what we can," he replied mechanically, already assessing the injuries with professional detachment. "St. Joseph's is at 400% capacity. Methodist's roof collapsed. We're rerouting critical cases to Galveston." As he spoke, the asphalt 20 feet away split open with a sound like tearing fabric. The crack zigzagged toward us, widening to 8 inches, then a foot. Steam or gas, I couldn't tell which, rose from the abyss. The ground seemed to pulse upward, as if something below was pushing against it. And then, I still don't know if I actually saw it or if my traumatized brain invented it. Something moved in that darkness. A segmented shape, glossy and chitinous, like the leg of some enormous insect, probing the edges of the fissure before withdrawing into the blackness. Gone so fast I couldn't be sure it was ever there. "Tell me you saw that," Tina whispered. "Saw what?" I asked, but a profound coldness gripped me. Tina's eyes, magnified by her scratched glasses, never left the crack, now filling with chunks of broken pavement. "Nothing," she said finally. "Just shadows. Trick of the light." But I knew she'd seen it too. Refugees streamed past us in both directions, some with purpose, others with the blank stare of the shell-shocked. A businessman in a shredded Brooks Brothers suit babbled into a dead cell phone. 3 Catholic nuns guided a line of schoolchildren, all clutching a long rope to stay together. We rejoined the flow, ducking down Bissonnette Street as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Its orange glow seemed to set the skyscrapers ablaze, those still standing silhouetted like broken teeth against the burning sky. People huddled in doorways, sharing wild theories. A bearded hipster with a PBR clutched in his grip insisted it was a government experiment gone wrong. A woman in nursing scrubs blamed fracking. A wild-eyed street preacher proclaimed the end times, waving a cardboard sign reading "Repent Now" as he danced on a car roof. "Do you really think it's just earthquakes?" Beth whispered as we passed under a dangling traffic light. Her fingers fidgeted with the silver medical alert bracelet she'd worn since her brother's death. "What else would it be?" Jacob replied, but his Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he swallowed. Annie looked back over her shoulder toward downtown, where dust clouds still billowed. "You all saw that helicopter footage. Something about it seemed wrong. The way the buildings collapsed. The size of that crater. What are you saying?" I pressed, though part of me didn't want the answer. "I'm saying Houston doesn't just sprout a San Andreas fault overnight." She tucked a strand of copper hair behind her ear, a gesture I'd seen her make 1,000 times in engineering labs when confronted with a problem she couldn't solve. "The patterns we're seeing, the way the ground is shifting, it's not typical seismic behavior." "Maybe it's all the drilling," Tina suggested, shifting her backpack straps. "Pumping out oil, injecting fracking fluid. We could have destabilized something underground." The explanation sounded plausible, scientific, rational, but it didn't silence the chaos in my head that kept replaying what I'd glimpsed in that fissure. The movement, the sheen of something like an exoskeleton, the deliberate way it had probed the opening. As streetlights flickered to life around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't fleeing from a natural disaster at all, but something much older and more terrifying. Something awakening after a very long sleep. Night fell over Houston like a funeral shroud. The sun disappeared, but the temperature stubbornly hung at 93 degrees, the humidity plastering my t-shirt to my back like a second skin. A police helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight slicing through plumes of black smoke. We paused outside the Greyhound station on Louisiana Street, its windows shattered, electronic departure board frozen mid-update. Dallas 7:15 p.m., delayed, blinked in erratic orange pulses. The station stood empty except for a homeless man passed out on a bench, seemingly oblivious to the apocalypse unfolding around him. Annie squinted at her phone's GPS. "See this old Burlington Northern line?" She traced her fingernail along a thin blue thread cutting through the city grid. Freight trains use it to bypass downtown. It runs straight northeast, out past the 610 loop. Cargo trains usually stick to the outskirts, she added, wiping sweat from her upper lip. "These tracks might be our ticket out of this hellhole." Jacob kicked an empty Coke can, sending it skittering across the cracked sidewalk. "No way. Railroad tracks mean tunnels, and tunnels mean dark, cramped death traps." His right eyelid twitched rapidly. "What if another quake hits while we're in there? We'd be buried alive." "Nobody's helping anyone out here," Annie said, gesturing toward an overturned ambulance, its lights still flashing uselessly, driver nowhere to be seen. "It's every poor bastard for themselves." Beth hugged herself, fingers digging into her upper arms. I don't know if I can do underground," she whispered. "After Clarence, after the auditorium. We'll be careful," I promised, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Then, in the distance, a gas main exploded, sending an orange fireball into the night sky. Car alarms wailed in discordant chorus. Tina adjusted her glasses, the left lens spider-webbed with cracks. "We've seen the alternatives," she said. "Washington Avenue is backed up for miles with abandoned cars. Memorial Drive has collapsed in 3 places. The rail line is straight, direct, and away from the worst damage. Finally, we chose the rail yard, not because anyone was convinced, but because staying put meant certain death." We trudged north on Travis Street, past a burning Tesla dealership where sleek electric cars melted like wax sculptures in the heat. I felt the constant vibration through the soles of my Converse, thrumming up through my ankle bones into my knees. Not the sharp jolts of aftershocks, but something steady, rhythmic, like feeling the bass from a car stereo, but coming from below. The Burlington Northern Yard sprawled across 3 city blocks, a maze of rusted tracks and abandoned freight cars dusted with graffiti. The 8-foot chain-link fence had been cut open, the metal peeled back like a sardine can. Bloody handprints marked the ragged edges where someone had sliced their palm making their escape. We slipped through the gap single file, Tina's backpack catching momentarily on a jagged wire. The rail yard smelled of creosote, diesel fuel, and rust. Rats scurried between the tracks, fat and bold in the beam of our flashlights. The low-frequency vibration intensified, rattling my back teeth in their sockets. My ears popped painfully, like descending in an airplane. "You guys feel that?" Jacob whispered, pressing his palm against his left ear. "Gosh," Annie muttered, pointing her flashlight beam toward the northern edge of the yard. A massive sinkhole had opened there, at least 30 feet across, the rails disappearing into blackness like roller coaster tracks plunging into an abyss. "That sound, you hear it? Like electrical feedback, but inside my head." Beth massaged her temples, smearing dirt across her forehead. "It's making me queasy, like motion sickness." Her complexion had taken on a greenish tinge visible even in the poor light. We approached a maintenance tunnel, a wide concrete arch spanning dual tracks that disappeared into absolute darkness. The entrance was tagged with elaborate graffiti, chaotic shapes in faded blue and red. My tired eyes tried to make sense of them, seeing unsettling forms where there were likely none. 20 feet in, the darkness swallowed our flashlight beams like water absorbing a droplet of ink. The air flowing from the tunnel mouth smelled of mildew and something muskier, animal. Jacob planted his feet on the gravel, hands curling into fists. "No fucking way. I'm not going in there." His voice cracked, higher than normal. Sweat poured down his temples despite the relative cool near the tunnel entrance. The argument died in its tracks as a sound echoed from the tunnel depths. Not a rumble or a crash, but a low, resonant moan that seemed to vibrate in my sternum. It was followed by a rush of fetid air that carried the stench of rotting meat and stagnant water. "What was that?" Beth whispered, pressing herself against me. "Air pressure from the quakes," Annie said automatically, but her voice wavered. "Trapped gases escaping, maybe." The scientific explanation died as another tremor, stronger than any before, ripped through the rail yard. The ground rippled like liquid, throwing us off our feet. I cracked my elbow on a rail, pain shooting up to my shoulder. The concrete tunnel entrance groaned, fissures spreading across its surface like lightning bolts. "Run!" she screamed, scrambling backward on hands and knees as the tunnel began to collapse. Jacob was closest to the sinkhole, and as we watched in horror, the cracked concrete beneath him simply melted. One moment he was on solid ground, the next he was waist-deep in churning gravel and soil, sinking like quicksand had opened beneath him. "Help!" he shrieked, arms flailing, fingers clawing at the disintegrating edge. "Oh God, help me." I lunged forward, belly flopping onto the ground to distribute my weight, and seized his wrists. His skin was slick with sweat, and he nearly slipped from my grasp. Annie grabbed his left arm, Tina his right. Together we pulled as Jacob continued to sink, now up to his chest. "Something's down there," he wailed, eyes bulging with terror. "It's got my leg. It's pulling me down." "Heave!" I shouted, muscles straining until white spots danced at the edges of my vision. Beth grabbed my belt from behind, anchoring me as we fought against whatever force was dragging Jacob into the earth. With a nauseating sucking sound, Jacob suddenly popped free, launching us all backward into a tangle of limbs. The hole where he'd been instantly widened, concrete and gravel sliding into darkness. For 2 heart-stopping seconds, I glimpsed movement in that abyss, something massive and jointed, like an enormous insect limb tipped with chitinous hooks, before it withdrew into the depths. Jacob sobbed uncontrollably, curled in fetal position, caked in mud and gravel. It grabbed me, he hiccuped, chest heaving. Like a hand, like a giant freaking insect claw. It was wrapping around my ankle, pulling down. It was just the suction from the collapsing ground, Annie insisted, but the blood had drained from her face. Bullshit, Jacob spat, his entire body trembling. I felt it. Cold. Hard. Like an exoskeleton. Pulling, not just sinking. Let me see, Beth said, professional calm settling over her as she switched to medical mode. She rolled up his mud-caked jeans to reveal his calf and ankle. We gasped in unison. Livid purple-black bruises encircled his lower leg in distinct bands, like something with immense strength had gripped him. The pattern was unmistakable. 4 separate marks, evenly spaced. Not random trauma from collapse. Deliberate. Purposeful. What the hell? Annie whispered, her skepticism finally crumbling. Jacob rocked back and forth, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on his face. It's alive, he moaned. Something's alive down there. Something big. It's under the whole damn city. Beth looked at me, real terror in her eyes for the first time. Not just fear of buildings collapsing, but something more primal. The fear of being prey. Evan, she whispered, what do we do? The rail yard with its unstable ground and partially collapsed tunnel now seemed like the worst possible escape route. Whatever lurked beneath could punch through the thin crust of civilization at any moment. My throat constricted as I helped Jacob to his feet. He leaned heavily on me, unable to put weight on his injured leg. We find another way, I managed, each word painful in my parched throat. There's always another way. But as we limped away from the rail yard, I couldn't shake the image burned into my retinas. That massive limb, segmented and alien, grasping with terrifying purpose. Not some mindless natural disaster, but something aware. Hunting. I've written horror stories since I was 12 years old. Created monsters that crept from closets, shambled from graves, oozed from sewers. But nothing in my imagination had prepared me for the reality of what lurked beneath Houston's crumbling streets. And judging by the widening crack splitting the pavement ahead of us, it was getting closer to the surface with every passing minute. We zeroed in on the Bayou Financial Center, a squat 12-story office building, a whole 6 blocks away from the edge of downtown's destruction zone. Only 3 windows still showed lights, flickering like dying fireflies against the darkened facade. From the upper floors, we might spot a route through the maze of collapsed streets and crushed vehicles that wouldn't get us killed. Guys, I can't... Jacob's voice hitched as he stumbled again, his weight nearly dragging Tina down with him. His right leg had swollen to twice its normal size, the skin stretched taut and shiny, mottled with bruises that had darkened from purple to a sick greenish black. It feels like someone poured acid into my veins. Just 50 more yards, I urged, pointing to the building's cracked revolving doors. We'll rest once we're inside. We half-carried Jacob across the cracked plaza, past a decorative fountain now filled with broken concrete and a drowned pigeon floating on its back. The scene inside was frozen in mid-evacuation. A Louis Vuitton roller bag sat abandoned next to a potted palm. A woman's red stiletto heel had snapped off, leaving the shoe lying on its side like a wounded animal. But most surreal of all was the 15-foot artificial Christmas tree that had toppled halfway over, gold and silver ornaments scattered like holiday shrapnel. A life-sized motorized Santa Claus caught beneath it, his mechanical arm still waving jerkily every few seconds. In April. "Why the hell is there a Christmas tree?" Beth whispered, her voice bouncing off the hard surfaces. Annie shrugged. "Maybe they never took down the decorations after the holidays. Or maybe time doesn't mean shit anymore," Jacob muttered. A wall-mounted 55-inch plasma TV flickered with static, occasionally resolving into the image of a balding FEMA official with pit stains darkening his white dress shirt. "Mandatory evacuation of all zones marked in red. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not," before dissolving back into gray snow. The TV's speakers hissed and popped, creating a soundtrack that made my skin crawl. Beth's fingers tightened around her backpack strap until her knuckles whitened. "Something's wrong here," she murmured. "It's too empty. Where are the other evacuees? This building should be full of people trying to get out." "I'm not complaining about the lack of company," Annie said, though her eyes darted from shadow to shadow as she unclipped the tactical flashlight from her belt. "We found the stairwell behind a fire door with a cracked exit sign hanging by a single screw. The elevator panel showed a red, out-of-service light, not that we would have trusted it anyway. The stairwell smelled of stale sweat and vomit, evidence that others had passed through not long before. Climbing 6 flights with Jacob's 180 pounds, partly supported between me and Beth, was pure torture. By the 4th floor, my quadriceps burned like I was doing wall sits with a kettlebell on my lap. Jacob groaned with each step, his injured leg dragging behind him like a useless appendage. "Almost there," Beth encouraged, though her face had gone ghost white with exertion, her curls plastered to her forehead. "Just 20 more steps." We emerged onto the executive floor, a maze of fabric-walled cubicles and glass-fronted offices. The corridor walls were lined with silk plants gathering dust and framed motivational posters showing eagles soaring over mountains with captions like "Teamwork together." Everyone achieves more. And persistence. The difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will. I wanted to punch whoever wrote that, right in their motivational teeth. When I stepped to the window wall, the full scope of Houston's destruction knocked the air from my lungs. The once proud downtown skyline was a graveyard of broken giants. The 75-story Texas Commerce Tower had snapped in half like a dry twig, its upper floors pancaked onto the streets below. The distinctive blue-green glass of the Heritage Plaza building had shattered completely, leaving only a skeletal framework against the darkening sky. But most horrifying was the massive crater that had swallowed 6 city blocks of the financial district. Annie eased between me and the window, raising the Canon binoculars we'd salvaged from the campus store. She adjusted the focus wheel, scanning methodically from left to right, her breath fogging the glass. Suddenly she stiffened, her sharp inhale audible in the quiet room. "Christ," she whispered, her face losing all color. "What is it?" I asked. Annie's hand trembled as she passed me the binoculars. "Look near the Wells Fargo building, the one with the green sign that's still lit. About 4 blocks west, where that big sinkhole opened up." I pressed the rubber eye cups against my face, hands shaking so badly I had to brace my elbows on the windowsill. The binoculars' 10x magnification brought distant devastation into nauseating clarity. Through swirling dust and the heat shimmer from fires, I focused on the massive crater Annie had indicated. Movement. Not the settling of debris or the natural collapse of unstable earth. Something deliberate. Something alive. I couldn't make out details at this distance, but I caught the rhythmic shifting of what looked like enormous jointed limbs moving in the shadows of the pit, disappearing and re-emerging from different points around its circumference. The scale was impossible. Each segment had to be at least the size of a city bus. The binoculars nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. "What the actual hell am I looking at?" "I don't know," Annie whispered, her engineer's mind visibly struggling to process something that shattered every law of physics and biology she'd ever learned. "But it's not a broken water main or a gas explosion." Beth pressed a fist against her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. If that thing, whatever it is, if it's really what grabbed Jacob, if it's causing all this, how do we get away from something that can tear apart an entire city? Jacob had collapsed into an executive chair, his skin waxy with shock, gaze fixed on his swollen leg. "We don't," he said flatly. "It's under the whole damn city, under us right now. We're already dead. We just haven't stopped moving yet." The floor beneath us trembled again, not the violent bucking of previous quakes, but a steady vibration, like standing on the platform of a subway station as a train approaches. A spiderweb crack raced across the corner office's window, the sound like ice breaking on a frozen lake. "We need to move," Annie warned, backing away from the glass. "This building isn't stable." We retreated into the corridor just as our phones vibrated in unison, the familiar, piercing emergency alert tone. The new message cut through the government boilerplate. "Leave Houston immediately. Proceed on foot if necessary." "No shit," Jacob muttered, stuffing his phone back into his pocket with shaking hands. A soft thump from the end of the hallway made us all freeze. Beth's head snapped toward the sound, her pre-med instincts kicking in. She squinted down the dim corridor. "There's someone there," she said, already moving forward before any of us could stop her. "Hello? Are you hurt? We can help." The figure slumped against the vending machine didn't respond. As Beth drew closer, the motion lights flickered on, revealing a woman in her 40s wearing a navy blue skirt suit, her honey blonde bob matted with blood on one side. Her blank eyes stared at nothing, mouth slightly open as if caught mid-sentence. Beth dropped to her knees, pressing her fingers to the woman's neck, though we all knew it was futile. After several seconds, Beth's shoulders slumped. She gently closed the woman's eyelids with her fingertips. "Carotid arteries cold," she said, her voice hollow. "She's been dead at least 2 hours." She gestured to a plastic ID badge clipped to the woman's lapel. "Melissa Davenport, accounting director." She almost made it out. Beth remained kneeling, staring at the dead woman's face. Her hands, smeared with drying blood, trembled violently. I can't keep doing this," she whispered, voice cracking. "Clarence, that mother, this woman, all these people just dying, while we run around like rats in a maze." I crouched beside her, placing my hand on her shoulder, feeling the fine tremors running through her body. "We can't save everyone, Beth. We just can't. None of this is fair." She was shouting now, voice bouncing off the corridor walls. "Good people are dying by the hundreds, maybe thousands, and we're just running scared, hoping we're not next. We're not even trying to understand what's happening." Annie approached cautiously, like Beth was a bomb that might detonate. "We're all doing our best, Beth. We're just trying to survive." "Are we?" Beth challenged, climbing to her feet, fists clenched at her sides. "Because it feels like we're just reacting, not thinking." "Evan," she turned to me, something desperate in her eyes. "You write horror stories. You're the one with imagination. What are we missing? What's really happening here? What is that thing down there?" The other three turned to me, their expressions a mixture of hope and dread. They wanted answers I didn't have, explanations for something beyond comprehension. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know it's not an earthquake or a sinkhole or any natural disaster. Something alive and aware is down there, and it's getting stronger, closer to the surface." Even saying it aloud sent a chill skittering down my spine. So with that answer, we returned to the stairwell, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. In the lobby, the emergency broadcast had changed. The image stabilized briefly as we passed. Multiple reports of unusual biological activity near the epicenter. Citizens are warned not to approach any strange formations or... Static swallowed the rest of the message. We exchanged grim looks. Unusual biological activity. The government's sterile phrase for whatever monstrosity lurked beneath the city. Outside, the last rays of sunset painted the broken skyline in shades of blood and fire. The air tasted of ash and something else, something organic and wrong, like the breath from a vast, unseen mouth. We had to get out of Houston before that mouth opened wider and swallowed what remained. We stumbled onto Fairview Street, choking on air thick with construction dust and hot ash. The street itself had fractured like a broken dinner plate, with a fire hydrant spewing rusty water into a 6-foot sinkhole. Jacob sagged between Annie and me, his skin burning through his t-shirt. The bruising had crawled up past his knee, black tendrils spreading beneath the skin like ink dropped in water. His calf had swollen so tight that his jeans cut into the flesh. "Gotta stop," he slurred, his right leg buckling completely. We barely caught him before he face-planted onto the cracked sidewalk. "Can't. Gosh, feels like my blood's on fire." We eased him down against a dented USPS mailbox, its blue paint scratched and peeling. Annie checked her cracked watch. "It's 8:47. We need to cover at least 3 more miles before we can rest." "Look at him." Tina gestured at Jacob, who had drawn his good knee to his chest, rocking slightly. "He can't make 3 more blocks, let alone 3 miles. Jacob's bloodshot eyes fixed on Annie. "Easy for you to say," he rasped. "Your leg doesn't feel like someone injected bleach into your veins." Beth knelt beside him, pressing her fingers to his carotid artery and frowning at the rapid, thready pulse. With gentle fingers, she rolled up his jeans to reveal skin stretched glossy and tight, mottled with colors that had no business being on a human body. "I don't understand," she whispered, touching the inflamed skin with the back of her hand. "It's radiating heat like a stovetop." "What does that mean?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Beth's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. "This isn't a crush injury or a broken bone. It looks like some kind of massive systemic inflammatory response. I've never seen anything like it in any medical textbook." "Go figure," Jacob croaked, a delirious half-smile twisting his lips. "No WebMD entry for giant underground monster poisoning." A fresh tremor rippled through the street, gentler than before but somehow more intentional. "We need proper shelter," I said, taking charge when nobody else would. "Somewhere stable enough to last the night. Jacob needs rest, and we all need a chance to regroup." Beth's gaze drifted past me. Her shoulders suddenly straightened. "There's someone over there." I turned to see an elderly man perched on the porch steps of a small craftsman-style house. Unlike the modern condo buildings surrounding it, this place looked like it had stood since the 1920s, with peeling yellow paint and a sagging front porch. The old man wore a Houston Astros cap pulled low, his bony fingers clutching a can of Lone Star beer. He stared at the broken street with the vacant expression of someone who'd witnessed too much to process. Beth headed straight for him, ignoring Annie's muttered, "For God's sake, not again." "Sir?" Beth crouched to meet his downcast gaze. "Are you hurt? We need to evacuate the area. Do you have somewhere safe to go?" The old man lifted his head slowly, age spots speckling his hollow cheeks. He blinked as if just noticing us. "I'm right where I need to be," he said, his voice weathered as old leather. His arthritic fingers tightened around the beer can. "Marion's upstairs. Can't leave without her." "Your wife?" Beth asked gently. He nodded, a slight tremor visible in his neck. 53 years this April. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. His watery blue eyes flickered toward the house's second floor. "Hospice said she'd have gone 2 weeks ago, but my Marion's a fighter. Wouldn't leave me even though she's hurting something terrible." Beth's eyes met mine over her shoulder, pleading wordlessly. I knew exactly what she was thinking. We couldn't just abandon this man and his dying wife. Annie's face hardened. "Beth, no. We can barely help ourselves right now." She jerked her chin toward Jacob, who had started shivering despite the sweat soaking his clothes. "We need to focus on our own people. Every ER doctor knows you can't save everyone. You focus on the ones you can actually help." The old man stared at the cracked concrete between his feet. "Marion hasn't left our bed in 3 months," he said, as if we weren't even there. "Too weak to stand. The pain's so bad, even with the morphine." He took a long pull from his beer. "Upstairs bedroom, east side of the house. I've been sleeping in the armchair next to her." My chest tightened with an emotion I couldn't name. We were wasting precious minutes, but how do you walk away from a lifetime of love in its final moments? "I'll help you get her out," I heard myself say, ignoring Annie's incredulous stare. The debate became moot as thunder cracked overhead, except it wasn't thunder. The ground lurched beneath our feet, and a deafening boom shook the air as the empty office building across the street pancaked in on itself, floors collapsing one into another like a folding accordion. Through the swirling dust, I saw the old man's house shudder. The front porch collapsed with the sound of splintering wood. "Get back," I shouted, yanking Beth away from the disintegrating structure. But the old man didn't move. He lifted his beer in a final toast as the roof caved in, timbers snapping like gunshots. "Marion!" the old man cried, his first show of emotion. "There's nothing we can do," Annie insisted, her voice gentler but unyielding. "The whole place is about to go up." The old man's shoulders slumped. "Then I'll wait here with her," he said simply, settling back onto what remained of his porch steps as smaller aftershocks continued to ripple through the ground. For a moment, Beth looked like she might break free and run to him. Instead, she covered her mouth with a dirt-streaked hand, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He nodded, a sad smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Some of us are meant to stay behind. You young folks still have living to do." He turned his gaze back to the ruined house. "Go on now. Marion and I just need a little privacy for our anniversary." Annie pulled Beth away, Tina and I supporting Jacob between us. We'd barely made it 30 yards when I heard a dull whoomp behind us, the sound of igniting gas. I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see if the old man was still sitting there, waiting to join his wife in whatever came after. We found temporary sanctuary at a community center toward the east side, furnished with sagging couches and dented folding tables. Gently, we lowered Jacob onto a vinyl sofa, his body leaving a sweat-slick imprint on the fake leather. "Try to rest," Beth murmured, brushing damp hair from his forehead. His skin had taken on a waxy yellow cast, dark circles ringing bloodshot eyes. "We'll figure this out." Annie and I attacked the vending machines with a fire extinguisher, shattering the glass to raid the stale chips and warm sodas inside. Tina discovered a first aid kit mounted to the wall behind the reception desk, pathetically inadequate, with nothing but band-aids, gauze, and a half-empty bottle of rubbing alcohol. We divvied up the night watch, each taking 3-hour shifts. The tremors had changed, coming less frequently, but with greater intensity. During my 2 a.m. shift, I sat in a plastic chair by the window, watching distant fires flicker across the broken cityscape. Jacob stirred on the sofa, his breath hitching. When I moved closer, his eyes were open, fever bright in the darkness. "Evan," he rasped, voice barely audible over the creaking building. "Need to tell you something." I crouched beside him, catching a whiff of something rotten beneath the sour sweat smell. His infected leg had started to stink like meat left too long in the sun. "I'm here, man." "What is it?" "I saw it," he whispered, fingers clutching at my wrist with surprising strength. "When it had my leg." Just for a second. "Saw what?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. "It's old, Evan. So damn old." His eyes seemed to look through me, focused on something far away. Been down there forever, sleeping, dreaming. Not from here, not from our world at all. A visceral chill slithered down my spine. "Jacob, you're delirious. The fever." "Listen to me," he hissed, fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "It's waking up. Been awake for a while, I think. But now it's really waking. And it's hungry. So hungry." Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. "It's in my head, Evan. I can hear it whispering, calling me, telling me things I don't want to know. What things? I couldn't help asking. His bloodless lips curled in a rictus smile. How small we are, how brief, how it was here before us, and it'll be here after. A violent shudder racked his body. Make it stop, Evan. Please, make the voices stop. I clutched his burning hand between mine, useless against whatever invasion was consuming him from the inside out. Try to sleep, Jacob. Just rest. We'll get you help when the sun comes up. He didn't sleep. None of us really did. Through the night, Jacob's condition deteriorated with horrifying speed. The black veins spread visibly beneath his skin, creeping up past his thigh and across his torso like a time-lapse video of spreading mold. At times he thrashed and screamed, fighting invisible tormentors. Other times he lay terrifyingly still, only the shallow rise and fall of his chest showing he still lived. Beth stayed by his side, but her medical knowledge, all those nights of flashcards and study groups, all those hundreds of pages of anatomy and pharmacology, were completely useless. By the time dawn's weak light filtered through the dusty windows, Jacob barely responded to his name. "He's dying," Beth whispered, defeat heavy in every syllable. "And there's nothing I can do." Annie squeezed her shoulder, uncharacteristically gentle. "This isn't on you." The first proper ray of sunlight lanced through the window, falling across Jacob's face like a spotlight. His eyelids fluttered, then opened fully. For the first time in hours, his gaze was clear, focused, present. "Hey," I said, leaning close. "How are you feeling?" A strange smile curved his cracked lips. "It's beautiful," he murmured, voice suddenly stronger. "I can see it all now." "See what?" I asked, my heart seizing with dread. "The pattern, the purpose." His gaze traveled beyond me, beyond the ceiling, beyond anything in this world. "It all makes sense from here. The beginning, the end. So perfect." He reached for my hand with fingers gone cold despite the fever that had burned through him all night. "It'll take you too, Evan. All of you. But not me. I'm already part of it." His cracked lips spread in a smile of terrible serenity. "Stay in the light as long as you can." His grip tightened once, painfully hard, then went slack. His chest rose on one last rattling breath, held it for a long moment, then deflated. And the strange light in his eyes dimmed, before dimming completely. He was no longer with us. Beth's sob tore through the quiet room. I sat paralyzed, still holding the cooling hand of my roommate, my friend, the guy who'd helped me move into the dorm freshman year, who'd taken me to my first real Texas rodeo, who'd talked me through my first brutal creative writing workshop rejection. Jacob Ford, dead at 21 from causes no medical examiner would ever be able to classify. We covered him with a dusty tablecloth from a storage closet. None of us could bear to look at the black veins still visible, still spreading across his skin even in death, as if whatever had infected him wasn't quite finished with its work. The sun climbed higher. We'd survived another night, but the cost had hollowed us out, leaving empty shells where college students had been just 24 hours earlier. Outside, the ground trembled again, a gentle reminder that our ordeal was far from over. But we couldn't leave Jacob in that musty community center rec room with its flickering lights and graffitied vending machines. Something about abandoning his body there felt obscene, disrespectful to the guy who'd shared my apartment for 3 years. So we found a wool emergency blanket in a supply closet, wrapped his body carefully, and lowered him into a shallow garden plot in the community center's courtyard. "I'm sorry we couldn't save you," Beth whispered, her voice cracking on the last word. Then suddenly Annie stiffened, her head cocking to one side like a hunting dog. "Listen," she hissed, one hand raised. Through the cacophony of destruction, buildings still collapsing, car alarms still wailing, the occasional distant scream. I heard it, the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter blades slicing through air. "Military choppers," Tina said, hope flickering across her face for the first time since Jacob started convulsing. Blackhawks, maybe. They must be evacuating survivors. We scrambled around the building's perimeter, my worn Converse skidding on loose gravel. A UH-60 Blackhawk hovered 30 feet above Herman Park's main field, its rotors kicking up a miniature dust storm. Even from 4 blocks away, I could see the desperate crowd swarming below it. "Move!" Annie shouted, already sprinting ahead, her copper ponytail bouncing against her shoulder blades. Before they fill up, we charged across Franklin Street, leaping over a fallen traffic light and skirting a Toyota Corolla that had plowed into a bus stop. The helicopter was lowering a rope ladder. 2 soldiers in digi-camo fatigues leaned out, reaching for the upstretched hands below. "Beth, come on!" I yelled over my shoulder. She'd fallen behind, her face gray with exhaustion, dark curls plastered to her sweat-streaked forehead. "I'm trying," she gasped, stumbling over a chunk of asphalt. We reached the edge of the park just as the scene devolved into chaos. At least 200 people crowded the field, shoving one another for position. A heavy-set man in a blood-stained business suit elbowed a teenage girl out of his way. A woman clutched a howling infant to her chest, using her own body as a shield against the surging crowd. A soldier with a bullhorn tried to establish order, his amplified voice cutting through the panic. "Remain calm. This chopper takes 20. Form lines. Another bird is inbound." Nobody listened. Nobody cared. When the Black Hawk reached capacity and the ladder began to retract, a balding man in his 40s made a desperate leap, catching the lowest rung. He dangled there, legs kicking wildly as the helicopter began to ascend. A soldier stomped on his fingers until he dropped, falling 15 feet onto the packed bodies below. "They're leaving us," a woman screamed, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. "They promised." "Another one is coming," I told Beth, who stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, her eyes vacant with exhaustion and trauma. "They said so." She gave a brittle laugh that sounded nothing like her. "And you believe that?" She gestured at the desperate throng. "Look at this. You think there are enough helicopters in Texas to get all these people out?" I had no answer. The Black Hawk shrank to a black speck against the hazy sky, carrying 20 lucky souls to safety while hundreds remained. Annie rejoined us, wiping dust from her bloodshot eyes. "We need to keep moving. Standing in one place makes us targets." "Targets for what?" Beth snapped, her usual calm fracturing under the weight of grief and exhaustion. Annie waved her hand at the devastation surrounding us. "Take your pick. Collapsing buildings. Desperate people. That thing underground. Take a goddamn look around you. This whole city's out to kill us." "Annie's right," Tina said quietly, her slim fingers clutching the strap of her backpack. "We need to keep pushing east. Get beyond the 610 loop." Beth stared at her mud-caked sneakers. "I'm so tired of running," she whispered. The bruise-colored circles under her eyes looked like permanent features now. "I know," I said, squeezing her shoulder. I could feel her bones through her thin cardigan, sharp as a bird's. "But we can't stop now. Not after—" I couldn't finish. Jacob's name lodged in my throat like a stone. We trudged onward. Annie's phone still had 27% battery, the cracked screen displaying Google Maps. She zoomed in on a route that would take us across Buffalo Bayou via the McKee Street Bridge, one of the smaller overpasses that might have survived the devastation that had claimed the major highways. "It's less than a mile north," she said, tapping the screen. "If we can cross there, we're past the worst of the damage zone." The sky darkened as we walked, bruise-colored clouds piling up to the west. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of approaching rain. Houston's notorious flash floods were the last thing we needed. "Storm's coming," Tina murmured, checking her weather app. "Looks bad. Radar shows it's moving fast." We reached McKee Street Bridge 40 minutes later, our pace slowed by debris-choked sidewalks and the occasional need to hide from roving groups of looters. The bridge itself was a mess. Cars sat abandoned in both lanes, a jackknifed FedEx truck, a flipped Honda Civic, a school bus with its emergency door hanging open. As we picked our way through the vehicular graveyard, Beth stopped abruptly, her right hand reaching blindly for support and finding my arm. This looks just like," she started, then swallowed hard. "Like the bridge where Michael died." We all froze mid-step. In the months I'd known Beth, she'd rarely spoken of her brother's accident beyond the bare minimum. "You never mentioned it was so similar." Annie's voice had softened, the drill sergeant edge replaced by something closer to compassion. Beth's jaw muscle twitched as she clenched her teeth. "It was during that freak storm last April, over in Galveston. Flash flooding. I was supposed to pick him up from his girlfriend's apartment, but I was late. Got caught up in a raid in World of Warcraft." Her laugh sounded more like a sob. "Ridiculous, right? He got tired of waiting, called an Uber. The driver lost control right there." She pointed vaguely toward the opposite bank. "Hydroplaned across 3 lanes and went through the rail. The car was upside down in 8 feet of water by the time emergency services arrived. The bridge groaned beneath us, a low metallic shriek as another tremor rippled through the ground. Beth's face drained of what little color remained, her eyes widening in primal fear. "We need to move," Tina urged. "This whole structure is compromised." Halfway across, the world dropped out from under us. A deafening crack split the air as the bridge shuddered violently. Concrete buckled and heaved in waves. The guardrails twisted like soft taffy. Huge chunks of the roadbed broke free, plummeting into the churning water below. Beth stood frozen in terror, her body rigid, reliving her brother's final moments. "Beth!" I lunged for her hand, but the asphalt between us split open, a jagged fissure widening with sickening speed. Her eyes locked on mine, wide with animal panic. Annie threw herself forward, wrapping her arms around Beth's waist, hauling her backward as the section of bridge where she'd been standing tilted at a 45-degree angle. With a final metallic screech, 20 feet of the overpass sheared away completely, splashing into the bayou in an explosion of muddy water and debris. We tumbled backward onto the eastern section of the bridge, which was still mostly intact. A severed bridge stood between us and the western bank, a 15-foot gap of empty space with churning water 40 feet below. We'd never be able to jump it. The way back was gone. Beth curled into herself on the cracked pavement, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," she choked out between gasps. I couldn't move. All I could see was Michael, trapped in that car, the water rising around him. I felt like I was there with him, like it was happening all over again. Tina knelt beside her, one arm around Beth's shaking shoulders. "It's okay," she murmured, though nothing about this situation qualified as okay by any stretch. "We made it. We're still here." Annie stood at the ragged edge of the broken bridge, staring into the churning water below. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. "This was our best route," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "We're going to have to find another way around." At that moment, the weight of our situation crashed over me. Every path we took crumbled. Every escape route vanished. It was as if the city itself, or whatever lurked beneath it, was systematically cutting off our options, herding us like cattle to slaughter. Then came the rain. It started as individual droplets, each one hitting my skin like an icy finger tap. Within minutes, it thickened to a steady patter, drumming against the broken asphalt and abandoned cars. The western sky had turned dark as purple-black clouds piled up like mountains, shooting through with veins of lightning. We stumbled into the Northside Industrial Park, a dead zone of concrete warehouses and chain-link fences topped with rusted barbed wire. A faded billboard advertised Houston's premier manufacturing hub, the smiling businessman's face peeling away in strips. "Christ, it stinks here," Annie muttered, pulling her shirt collar over her nose. Lightning strobed across the sky, illuminating a fissure that split the empty loading yard in two. It wasn't a small crack. This was a canyon, at least 8 feet across at its widest point and stretching maybe 50 yards. The edges were ragged, with chunks of concrete tilting inward like broken teeth. "Let's stay away from that thing," I said, pointing to the gaping wound in the earth. "No shit, Sherlock." Annie's sarcasm couldn't mask the tremor in her voice. "Last thing we need is to end up wherever Jacob got pulled." Beth wrapped her arms around herself, shoulders hunched against the increasing rain. "Can we please just not talk about what's down there? I can't handle thinking about it right now." We skirted the edge of the fissure, keeping at least 15 feet between us and the drop-off. Even at that distance, I felt a strange vibration through the soles of my Converse, like standing on a subwoofer playing a note too deep to hear. Something was happening down below. Something big. A sound floated up from the darkness. A rapid clicking, like a giant jaw opening and closing, followed by a wet, gurgling chirp that made my skin prickle with goosebumps. "Did you hear that?" Beth whispered. Beth's flashlight beam wavered as she pointed it into the crevasse. The weak light barely penetrated the first 20 feet, revealing shattered pipes, twisted metal, and dark, wet earth. Then, movement. It wasn't subtle. Something massive shifted in the depths. Something with a segmented exoskeleton that caught the light in glossy patches. I glimpsed what looked like a jointed limb, thick as a telephone pole, ending in a hooked claw that scraped against concrete with a noise like knives on pottery. It probed upward, testing the edge of the fissure before withdrawing with disturbing speed. "Oh God," and he stumbled backward, tripping over a broken cinder block. "Move. Now." Beth yanked on my sleeve, her eyes wild with panic. "It's right under us." We scrambled away from the fissure, no longer caring about the rain stinging our faces or the mud sucking at our shoes. Heading for the nearest exit, we found a gap in the fence where something heavy had plowed through, bending the chain link into a ragged hole. "What in the world was that?" Tina gasped as we squeezed through the damaged fence one by one. "That looked like a giant crab leg or something." Beth hugged herself tighter, shivering despite the warm rain. Jacob was right. There's something down there. Something huge. "Let's focus on getting out of here," I said, pushing wet hair out of my eyes. "Theories can wait until we're safe." "Safe?" Annie barked out a laugh tinged with hysteria. "After what we've seen in the past 24 hours? The auditorium imploding, Jacob getting infected by some kind of venom, that thing in the ground. You still think they're safe anywhere near this messed up city?" Suddenly, the sky cracked open like a rotten egg. What started as scattered raindrops transformed into a biblical deluge within minutes. Houston's infamous flash floods in full, vengeful glory. The rain whipped sideways, stinging my face like tiny needles, soaking through my clothes until my jeans clung to my legs like a second skin. "Just perfect," Annie snarled, spitting out rainwater as she shoved her copper hair back from her eyes. As if killer earthquakes and giant bug monsters weren't enough. Now we get to drown in this shit soup too. The bayou area had transformed into a churning lake. The murky brown water rose with terrifying speed, carrying a parade of urban debris. A blue recycling bin spinning lazily in the current. A child's pink big wheel tumbling end over end. A bloated opossum carcass bobbing alongside a waterlogged FedEx package. Beth's eyes widened as she watched the water creep up her shins. "We need high ground," she choked out. "Now." "There." Tina's voice cut through the hammering rain as she pointed toward a concrete monolith looming through the downpour. "That parking structure on Holcomb, the one for the medical center. 5 levels high, solid concrete." I squinted through sheets of rain. Texas Medical Center's Garage 7 stood like a brutalist fortress amid the chaos, its utilitarian design suddenly the most beautiful architecture I'd ever seen. Water lapped around its ground-level entrance, but the upper floors remained dry, tantalizingly out of the flood's reach. We slogged forward, each step a battle against the strengthening current. The water reached mid-thigh now, its weight dragging at my waterlogged jeans. A half-submerged stop sign marked where the street should be, our only navigation point in the expanding lake. By the time we reached the parking garage entrance, the water was surging around our waists. The current pulled at us with surprising strength, threatening to sweep our feet out from under us. We clung to each other, forming a human chain as we fought our way up the entrance ramp. Inside, the concrete sloped upward at a blessed 15-degree angle, leading us away from the floodwaters. Our shoes squelched and farted against the smooth surface, leaving muddy puddles in our wake. The garage echoed with our ragged breathing and the distant rumble of thunder. "Second level should be safe enough," Annie panted, wringing water from her shirt and creating a puddle at her feet. "Unless this whole fucking city collapses into a sinkhole." We trudged upward, our footsteps echoing off bare concrete walls covered in faded graffiti. "Marcus loves Diane. Astros 2017 champs. The end is near." That last one painted long before today's apocalypse, though suddenly prescient. A few abandoned vehicles squatted in parking spaces. A white Honda Accord with a "My child is an honor student" bumper sticker, a mud-splattered F-150 with oversized tires, a Mini Cooper with a cracked windshield. Their owners had likely fled when the first quakes hit, leaving their vehicles behind like prehistoric insects trapped in amber. We found a relatively clean corner on the second level, collapsing against the wall in a heap of sodden clothes and exhausted limbs. My muscles quivered with fatigue. I hadn't slept more than a few broken hours since the first tremors hit campus, and the prolonged adrenaline rush had left me crushed. "This is beyond ridiculous," Beth managed between chattering teeth, squeezing water from her curls. "First the ground tries to eat Jacob, then the buildings start falling, now a damn flood. Houston's never been a city that does anything halfway," I said, attempting humor that fell flatter than the horizon. Tina drifted to the edge of the level, peering down at the floodwaters that now completely submerged the ground floor. Her body language changed suddenly, shoulders tensing, spine straightening. "Guys," she whispered, voice thin with fear. "Something's out there." We scrambled to join her, pressing against the concrete half-wall that separated us from a 30-foot drop. Through the rain-blurred air, I could make out the floodwaters below, stretching in every direction like a vast brown sea. But the surface wasn't uniform. Strange ripples disturbed the water, moving in patterns that defied the natural current. Concentric circles expanded outward from a central point. "What is that?" Beth breathed, fingers digging into my forearm hard enough to leave marks. I opened my mouth to respond with some comforting lie, but the words died in my throat as the floodwater bulged upward, a dome rising like a breaching whale. Then the surface broke, and a nightmarish limb emerged, segmented like a scorpion's tail but thick as a redwood trunk. Its exoskeleton gleamed wetly in the dim light, the color of congealed blood. Articulated joints bigger than SUVs bent with horrifying fluidity as the limb rose higher, water cascading from crevices between plates. "Sweet Jesus," Annie whispered. Her usual sarcasm evaporated in the face of undeniable horror. The limb extended at least 40 feet into the air, swaying slightly as if tasting the rain. Secondary appendages like massive crab pincers unfurled from its main segment, each ending in hooked barbs that could impale a human as easily as a toothpick spears an olive. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the limb plunged back beneath the surface, creating a miniature tsunami that slammed against the parking garage with enough force to shake the concrete beneath our feet. Muddy water sluiced through the ground floor entrance, rising another 2 feet in seconds. "That's it," I choked out, my voice a stranger's in my ears. "That's what grabbed Jacob. That's what's been causing the earthquakes. We need to get out of this city," Annie whispered, all bravado stripped away. "Right now, before that thing fully surfaces." We turned toward the stairwell, desperate to find another exit route, when a bone-rattling tremor shook the entire structure. The concrete floor buckled beneath us, hairline cracks spreading like lightning bolts across the surface. "Run!" I grabbed Beth's hand, yanking her toward the stairwell door as the section where we'd been standing sagged ominously. The stairwell wasn't much safer. Each step shuddered under our weight, loose tiles breaking free and tumbling into the darkness below. The handrail had partially torn from the wall, leaving jagged metal spikes protruding at odd angles. "Test each step," Annie warned, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Don't put your full weight down until you're sure it'll hold." We stepped down with excruciating slowness, the entire structure swaying around us. The ground-level landing was already submerged in 4 feet of murky floodwater. "We'll have to swim for it," Tina said, her voice surprisingly steady. Beth's face contorted in horror. "In that?" She stabbed a finger toward the churning waters where we'd just seen the monstrous limb emerge. "Hell no. That thing is out there. And this building is coming down," I replied, wincing as another support column cracked somewhere above us. "We don't have a choice." As if to punctuate my point, a massive section of the ceiling collapsed 30 feet away, sending a geyser of water and concrete dust erupting into the air. "Link up," Annie commanded, extending her hands to Beth and Tina. "Form a chain. Whatever happens, don't let go." We waded into the floodwaters, gasping as the cold hit our already chilled bodies. The current tugged immediately, trying to pull us in 4 different directions. I kept a death grip on Beth's hand, feeling her trembling fingers locked with mine. "It's okay," I lied, pushing forward against the waist-deep water. "We're going to make it." Even as the words left my mouth, I felt a shift in the current beneath us. Something massive displaced the water, creating a swirling undertow that nearly swept my feet out from under me. Ahead, I spotted salvation. A city bus half submerged in the flood, wedged sideways across what used to be Holcomb Boulevard. Its bulk broke the current, creating a relatively calm pocket on the leeward side. "The bus!" I shouted over the rain and rushing water. "Head for the bus!" We battled forward. The water surged to chest height now, forcing us to half swim, half walk through the murky soup. I tried not to think about what might be floating alongside us, or moving with purpose beneath. We were 15 feet from the bus when the water around us turned into a whirlpool. Something massive brushed against my legs, a touch that scraped along my calf with alien curiosity. Beth's scream pierced the air. "Something's in the water. It's touching me." "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Her fingers nearly slipped from mine as she thrashed in panic. "Don't stop." Annie's voice cut through the chaos. After what felt like hours but must have been seconds, my outstretched hand slapped against the metal side of the bus. I hauled myself up, then turned to help Beth, dragging her beside me onto the vehicle's tilted roof. Annie and Tina scrambled up after us, collapsing onto the slick metal surface. We lay there gasping like landed fish, rain pelting our faces, hearts hammering against our rib cages. It touched me," Beth stammered, hugging her knees to her chest. "Wrapped around my ankle for a second. It felt like a giant insect leg, but wrong. Cold and hard, but moving like it knew exactly what it was doing." She shuddered violently. "Not like a crab or lobster. More like it had intelligence." I nodded, unable to find words. "Look," Tina whispered, pointing toward downtown. Through sheets of rain, the Houston skyline had transformed beyond recognition. The J.P. Morgan Chase Tower, once the tallest building in Texas, now tilted at a 30-degree angle, its upper floors partially collapsed. The Pennzoil Place's twin trapezoids had crumpled inward, their distinctive black glass shattered. Between them, a massive depression had formed in the earth, as if the very ground was being pushed upward from below by something of incomprehensible size. "It's surfacing," Annie breathed, the words barely audible over the rain. "The whole damn thing is coming up." As we watched, the earth near Allen Center split open with a sound like continental plates shifting. Asphalt, concrete, and steel rebar erupted upward in a geyser of destruction. Through the gap, something emerged, a section of curved, ridged shell the color of dried blood, glistening with rain and streaked with mud. The visible portion alone must have been the size of a football field, and it was clearly just a fragment of the whole. "We need to move," I said, my voice sounding distant in my own ears. "Away from downtown, as far as possible." Beth laughed, a brittle sound on the edge of hysteria. "And go where?" "Look around, Evan. We're surrounded by water. That thing is under us. The buildings are collapsing. Where exactly do you suggest we run to?" She had a point. The floodwaters stretched in every direction, broken only by partially submerged buildings and scattered debris. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and somewhere beneath that churning brown sea, a nightmare creature straight out of Lovecraft was stirring. "We're not giving up," I said with more conviction than I felt. "Not yet." Tina stood shakily, scanning our surroundings with narrowed eyes. "Look there," she said, pointing to a row of small commercial buildings about 50 yards away. "Those rooftops are close enough together that we might be able to jump between them. Stay above the water." It wasn't much of a plan, but it beat waiting for the bus to sink or the creature to find us. We carefully made our way to the edge of the bus roof, judging the distance to the nearest stable surface. The roof of a submerged Honda CR-V, its red paint barely visible through the brown water. "I'll go first," Annie volunteered, backing up a few steps to get a running start. She cleared the 6-foot gap easily, landing with a metallic thud on the car's roof. "Come on," she called, waving us forward. One by one, we made the jump. From the CR-V, we leapt to the green canvas awning of a flooded taqueria, then to the flat roof of a single-story laundromat. The storm roared around us, lightning slashing the sky in violent purple-white forks. From our new vantage point, I could see a potential path, a series of rooftops stretching eastward, away from the devastation of downtown. None were more than 8 feet apart, technically jumpable if you didn't think too hard about the consequences of missing. "Ready?" I asked, eyeing the gap to the next building, a nail salon with a flat, tar paper roof. Beth's face was a mask of determination despite the terror evident in her eyes. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." We continued our bizarre urban island hopping, leaping from building to building like some parkour competition. With each flash of lightning, I caught glimpses of downtown's continuing collapse, skyscrapers toppling like dominoes, roads buckling, and always that massive shell rising higher from the earth. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, the rain finally began to slacken. The flood showed no signs of receding, but at least visibility improved. We found shelter in the attic of an abandoned Victorian house, accessing it through a dormer window after a precarious climb from an adjacent rooftop. The floodwaters had reached the second-floor windows, but the attic remained dry, if musty with the smell of old insulation and rodent droppings. Exhaustion hit us like a physical blow once we were finally safe. We collapsed in a huddle against the sloped ceiling, too tired even to remove our sodden clothes. I felt Beth's head droop against my shoulder, her breathing deepening as she surrendered to sleep. I meant to stay awake, to keep watch, but my body had other ideas. Consciousness slipped away like water between cupped fingers, dragging me into dreams filled with chitinous limbs and crushing depths. In my nightmare, I was Jacob, being dragged down into infinite blackness, alien venom spreading through my veins like liquid fire. I jolted awake sometime later. Gray pre-dawn light filtered through a small round window in the attic's end wall. My friends still slept, their faces gaunt and haunted even in unconsciousness. I crawled to the window, joints creaking in protest, and peered out at what remained of Houston. The rain had stopped, though floodwaters still stretched to the horizon in every direction. The sky had cleared enough to reveal the devastation in stark detail. Downtown was simply gone. Where the gleaming skyscrapers of America's fourth largest city once stood, a massive shape now dominated the skyline. The creature had emerged almost completely, a mountain-sized horror straight out of humanity's deepest nightmares. Its shell rose at least 60 stories high, ridged and segmented like some prehistoric crustacean. The carapace wasn't smooth but covered in barnacle-like protrusions and crystalline structures that caught the dawn light in nauseating rainbow patterns. Multiple limbs extended from beneath this shell, some thin and whip-like, others thick as sequoia trunks, each moving with intelligent purpose. Some burrowed into the earth, others swept through the air as if testing the new medium. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. Not quite crab, not quite insect, not quite anything with a terrestrial analog. It existed in a biological category all its own, ancient beyond comprehension, alien in a way that transcended the word's meaning. I watched, transfixed with horror, as it continued to rise millimeter by millimeter, shrugging off the city's infrastructure like a man might brush lint from his shoulder. Office towers crumpled in its wake, reduced to dust and twisted metal. The creature paid them no more mind than we would stepping on an anthill. This wasn't a natural disaster. This wasn't even an attack. This was an awakening, a slumbering god from the primordial depths stretching after an eon-long nap. And we were nothing but mites clinging to the hairs of a dog, insignificant witnesses to an event far beyond human comprehension. I turned away from the window, my legs nearly buckling beneath me. The others still slept, momentarily spared the full realization of what we faced. Let them rest, I thought, sliding down against the wall. Tomorrow, we face the end together. That's the end of this story. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.